Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are drawing Iron Man, which, I realized at some point that the last time I drew Iron Man was the Marvel Nemesis Iron Man, which was quite some time ago. And I feel like the last time I drew Iron Man shouldn't have been that. Just for the sake of it being Marvel Nemesis. I'm doing Iron Man again, and much like again the last couple of characters who have been semi-redos, they've been revisits to characters who have been done before. I'm actually just realizing now that technically the last time I did Iron Man was the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 mural, but before that it was Marvel Nemesis. Even though Iron Man has been on my list for a while, I've never actually just gone out of my way to do Iron Man. It's always been a thing where I happen to do Iron Man. But here I'm doing Iron Man, and I'm doing a soft redesign like the last couple, where I'm doing a sort of semi-redesign where I'm incorporating, because my personal favorite Iron Man design is the modular suit from the 90s, but I feel like it's a little flat. That's the same suit that he appears in the Marvel vs. Capcom games. But I'm making some adjustments to it. I'm sort of modernizing it, which is to say that it's significantly more complicated and more in keeping, I suppose, with the kind of movie-ish Iron Man designs, and also the kind of more modern comic ones, which are again kind of same sort of thing. But it'll still have the kind of same general idea of where it's mostly just the top red and then the gold in the middle and then kind of gold arms and stuff like that. But that's the general idea of what I'm going for, is that sort of color scheme and stuff like that. But yeah, with all that said, I think I'll just roll the intro and then we'll actually get started, and I'll show you what I'm doing here, because I don't necessarily have a topic, but I'll kind of think about that. I'll sort of introduce some of the ideas, at least, that we'll be talking about whenever I actually get to showing you what I have. So yeah, anyways. Intro. Okay, so this is what I've got, and we're in a rare situation where I can actually show you my reference image, because it's just an image of a toy. Because that's very useful sometimes for doing flying poses, which is what I'm doing here. So I used this pose of one of the Hot Toys of Iron Man. I changed his hands because he's got closed hands. But I used most of the rest of it as is, and I obviously changed the design and all this stuff because I don't want to use the same design. I can just delete that now, actually, I don't need it anymore. But yeah, so that's generally the idea of what I did with the reference, is I mostly just used it as is. I changed the hands, stuff like that. That's not normally how I do it, but here it just so happened that I had something that was good enough as is. So I just used most of the elements of it. Again, obviously I completely changed the design, and then I changed his hands and all this stuff. So yeah, I suppose we could talk a little bit about posing, because I had the reference, and you can see how I changed it. I changed this leg as well, because his leg was facing the other way, so this leg here I changed the way that it's facing. So yeah, I suppose that's kind of the core elements here. And also, again, we're dealing with a bit of an angle. We're dealing with a body angle of where the kind of front, the chest is forward, and then the kind of center body is in. So you're seeing the kind of, again, the knee here is, or the leg here is also coming out. This leg is going back, this arm's going back, this arm's going forward. So there's a lot of the little bits of perspective going on here as well. But yeah, so in terms of what we've got for the design, I've altered the design so that the mask is pointed more so, because I kind of prefer the pointed mask on Iron Man, but it's not too rounded, so it's still kind of got those elements. And I kind of want to give it just a full gold faceplate that goes down to the chin, but I might make this tiny little piece here at the bottom red, just so that there's a tiny bit of red at the bottom. And yeah, so these bits in the arm here, that'll be gold. Whole shoulder piece, there's this straight line here, which you can see, that's to kind of give me an idea of where the gold will start on the midsection, and then that comes down to the kind of waistline here, and then it's all red from there pretty much. All red from there pretty much. I might intersperse some tiny little bits of silver here and there just to kind of break up some of the colors, because we're going to be dealing with, again, a lot of gold and a lot of red. However, unlike the actual modular suit design, I'm going to incorporate some of the kind of blue lights that he tends to have in the more modern design. So his eyes and his chest will be, yeah, his eyes and his little chest light will also be blue. And it's the same with the streaks coming off of his hands and foot. Those will also be blue. Not sure what I'm going to do background wise. I might just throw in some kind of clouds and make it like a kind of a blue sky sort of thing going on. I don't know. I want it to be something that that kind of contrasts against the blue, so that the kind of streaks here stand out, because I don't want it to just kind of blend away. I don't want it to just kind of fade away into the background, because that won't look very interesting. I'm not sure. I'll think about that. But yeah, I suppose our kind of topic today here is going to sort of be lighting, because obviously Iron Man's armor is metal, so, and it's typically shiny metal, so we're going to be dealing with some of that in terms of our lighting. So I'm going to need to apply kind of a slight white sheen to a lot of the armor over our typical normal shading, and so I'll be doing that as we're going with the painted shading later. So whenever I paint over everything, I'll probably do like the rim light along the top of him here, something like that, and then I'll just have like a slight little like white streak, a little white streak like that, maybe somewhere down there. Have it come down around like that, and then down there, stuff like that. Just kind of little white streaks that kind of emphasize the kind of bend of the metal. Because again, that's something which is otherwise going to be kind of hard to sell. Is the kind of the shape of things, the kind of the roundedness in certain places, like the chest plate might not necessarily come across as having roundedness to it, unless that kind of that sheen comes in the right place. And again, I've done my best here to apply some bits like that, but it's not necessarily going to come across. It's not necessarily always going to come across. Now, a thing which I did last time I did Iron Man, and just last time during the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 mural, I did a lot of stuff like this, which was, again, like a lot of metallic bits on characters. I did like the kind of hatching along the edges of it to signify that it's metal. I'm not going to do that here because that'll take me all day. I haven't really done a lot recently at all anyways. But the general kind of idea I'm going to go for here is I'm going to try and keep it smooth and clean. But I am going to try and, yeah, keep the kind of sleek shine to it, and that's part of it as well, is that Iron Man is typically quite sleek looking. But yeah, Iron Man's armor is typically kind of shown to be sleek, crisp, all this type of stuff, and I think of it in such a way where it's like a suit. I mean, obviously it is described as a suit, that's the terminology they use. It's not a costume, it's a suit. But like a tech tuxedo is almost the way that I'd almost describe it. That's the way, in my mind, that it looks, is not necessarily cumbersome or bulky, even though he has got these kind of like broad, big shoulders, and a lot of it is kind of big and thick. It should look kind of trim in places of where, like, again, like it comes in to kind of form in on the waist and everything here. So he has very much the kind of normal, I don't even want to say normal, he has the kind of form of just being kind of like buff, even though Tony Stark isn't buff, typically. But yeah, that's the general kind of idea I think of, at least with Iron Man's armor, is that it kind of has this, it should look very kind of sleek, is the word I keep saying. But yeah, in terms of our lighting, we know what we're doing. That will be a lot of stuff for later. Anyways, our redesign, mostly pretty simple, follows along the kind of general ideas of the movie. It's got all these little moving parts, like the little kind of joint there, and again the knee kind of the knee piece kind of forms out and then moves back in these little kind of separate ridges and little tiny little joints and ball joints and stuff like that move back through. And little hinges and all that stuff that go through there. And there's all these tiny little moving parts that are going to be quite a challenge to draw. So this is the thing, is that whenever you're drawing, in my experience at least with drawing Iron Man, it tends to get very technical. And that's just, I think that is just part of the nature of Iron Man, is that for any sort of kind of high-tech character, is you're going to get a lot of this very technical stuff because there's a lot of bits, there's a lot of pieces, a lot of moving parts. And again, I've tried to add stuff here where you can see like the ridges and the shapes here. Like this isn't necessarily like a line with actual purpose. That's just a part of the shape of the front of the mask that kind of comes in like that. Just to kind of shape the face of the mask a little bit more. It's the same deal with parts of this, like here with the chest. That's just to shape it out so that you can see the kind of, I don't even want to say boxiness, but the kind of harder edges of it in places that then kind of smooth out as they go across like that. But yeah, that's the general idea anyways. I don't feel like I need to kind of go on for ages and ages and ages about this, because I am starting a tiny bit later in the day than I normally would, so I am not quite as full of time as I was, as I have been the last few. But yeah, anyways, I'll probably adjust the streaks coming off his hands to be more in keeping with the one off of his foot, because I like the one off his foot a little bit better. It's straighter and neater. These ones are quite messy, so I'll probably try and keep them following the same angle-ish as the one off of his foot. I think, maybe, something like that, we'll see. We'll see what I do with that. I'm going to try and clean them up anyways as I'm going. But, anyways, I will begin. I'll begin, I'll do the details, and then I'll be back to do the colours after that, obviously. Okay, that is our details done. That was a lengthy process. That is over 2.5 hours. So yeah, and I had to take several breaks during that whole process for various reasons. But yeah, so that is that's a hefty amount of the work done, I suppose, because the colors won't take very long because there is 4 at max. You got red, gold, blue, and potentially some silver, but I can't imagine there being very much of that. I'll do that after I do the red and the blue, or the red, the blue, and the gold, because doing it first will just make it too hard to remember where everything is. So I'll just do it afterwards, and then I'll go over everything and put in the little bits of silver that I want, so that it's just not too confusing to do all right away. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the background. I'm honestly debating just doing a solid color at this point, just to conserve some time because of how lengthy this was. But I suppose I may as well mention it now. That yeah, so it's worth mentioning that whenever you're drawing something like Iron Man, like anything very technical, it's going to take a long time, because it's going to have to be little rivets and bolts and all this stuff, and you saw it, like there's the little rivets and bolts going through the armor. There's all this stuff even on the helmet. The helmet took like half an hour just in itself. And then all the shoulders and all the little lines and stuff, all these little bits kind of connecting everything. And then there's parts of it which are intentionally left a little flatter, like the shoulders, which are a little bit more geometrical. And even the same with a lot of bits of the gauntlet, the gauntlets and stuff like this. There's these little kind of bits where it's like slightly angled, so there needs to be that little ridge there to define that it's slightly angled, and then obviously it dips inwards like that, so that's, again, it's like slightly angled, so you get that kind of sort of element of it there. And it's just the nature of doing something like this. This is a 2.5 hour long detail section alone. You're gonna get this type of thing whenever you're dealing in detailed characters. Not even detailed characters, but character technical designs. The Iron Man design that you see in a movie is designed by a team of people who only have to model it once. And this is the thing you have to think of, is the reason why Iron Man in the comics is typically a lot simpler looking is because an artist has to draw about 30 to 40 times an issue. So it's just kind of absurd, the idea of them doing anything like that constantly. So for example, a design like this, God forbid an artist would ever do a design like this in a comic or anything like that, or any sort of place where they'd have to draw it more than once. Imagine animating this as like a 2D animation. It'd be obscene. And so this is just the thing that just kind of has to sink in, I suppose. It's like, this is not a design that you would see anywhere but on a single drawing that is done maybe once or twice in my entire life. That is done less than 30 times in my entire life. That's the sort of idea here, because this is it's just not a quick thing to do. It's not a quick thing to do. Something which I do like, though, a detail which I liked, was the way that I did the kind of the streaks coming off of the boots and the gauntlets. So I mean, you even saw me just doing it there. I just did the kind of cone shape and then just sort of bled lines up through it, sort of like the speed lines. But I sort of kind of like made them intentionally kind of messy, so the idea is that it's like the light is like burning through it, and then it's getting like kind of messier towards the end. I think that's a little bit more interesting looking, that it's kind of like trailing out. But obviously it's like it's weirdly perfect looking in terms of its shape, of where it's like these very fine sharp edges, and then it remains like quite clear in the middle, all this stuff, of where it's like, again, as I say, oddly perfect. I think that's interesting looking, because it's not like a flame or anything like that coming off of Iron Man's repulsors. It's like plasma. So you would think to yourself, oh, maybe it's like it's got a very defined shape, which is kind of interesting. I think it's kind of interesting and weird. But yeah, I mean, realistically speaking, there's not much with the colors. The colors are the easy part of this. The hard part is going to be the painted shading, because then I have to try and sell the fact that this is kind of smooth, clean metal, which is not easy. But yeah, So with the blue, because that's going to be the first thing I do, I'm going to apply like a very soft outer glow to it, but it's going to have, drop the pen, it's going to have a lot of inner glow to it. So that it's got so that the inside of it is like kind of like a very pale blue, but then the edges are a very dark blue, because that'll look a lot better on something like the that'll look a lot better on something like the trails. It'll look a lot better on the trails. My brain is really fighting me today. I don't know what it is. Yeah. Ooh. So yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think now, is there anything else I need to really go over? I don't think so. Again, but just yeah, as I said, like just again, it's gonna look very technical. It's gonna look like it's got a lot of lines, all this stuff. It gets very complicated around the legs. I try to keep it, but again, that's partly because a lot of these elements are a little bit more compacted because there's perspective going on here. The top of his body is closer to the camera, so you're not going to see as much detail. Not even you're not going to see as much. It's going to be more spread out. Whereas on the legs, because it's technically further away, all the detail is more compacted in, so it's going to be a little bit more, I don't even want to say messy, but a little bit more kind of, there's a lot more going on there. So yeah, that's the sort of thing. Like, I mean, again, the helmet has a lot of detail, but it's, because his head is kind of closer to the camera than his foot is, you're not going to see it as compacted in, as kind of truncated in terms of space. I tried to include these little bits along like the sides of his legs, because that's part of the modular design, like these weird like chunk things which have like these rivets in them. I'm not really sure what they are or what they're supposed to be. I didn't include the ones on his arms because I wanted it to just be a little bit more clean, but I did the kind of impression of it on the back of his arm here, because I think that's interesting enough looking. But yeah, I don't think there's a huge amount more I need to go over. I think I'm content to continue. So yeah, I'll do the colours and we'll be back to do the painted shading. And I'll probably do the background during this section. I'm tempted to do a solid colour just for the sake of my own sanity and time. Granted, it wouldn't be too difficult to do like a cloudy sky sort of thing, so I might consider doing that, like a bright blue sky, kind of like clouds maybe down here, and then bright blue sky up here, maybe like some wispy clouds just to disperse it. Maybe even put like a little bit of a sun over here that's kind of like bleeding across the sky, do a lens flare or something like that. Not super hard. Maybe I'll do that, who knows, because that's not particularly hard. It won't take very long, so who knows. Anyways, I'll continue. Okay, that is our colours done. It's getting there now, it's getting there in the evening. It is starting to get dark, the sun has begun to set, so it is getting darker in here. But we're not quite at the lowered frame rate zone yet, not that that's going to happen because I've still got my front light. But I do feel like tonight it's going to get to the point where I am actually going to need to put a light on in here for the first time in quite a while. I've been enjoying the fact that I've been able to get most of these done recently, before it actually gets dark properly, but that doesn't seem like it's going to happen this time. But yeah, I made an executive decision at some point here that I decided I wasn't going to do silver at all. Because I had a thought, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll do some silver at some point, just to kind of like filter that in, just to kind of spread the colors out a little bit. But I just decided, you know what, no. I think it looks better whenever it's just the red and the gold. I think it looks better, and it'll be easier to work with. It'll be easier to work with whenever it's just the red and the gold. It'll just be easier as just the two colors. But yeah, so I decided with the background that I was going to do the bright blue sky thing, and then there's kind of like some wispy clouds, kind of also almost like kind of parting as he's like flying through them. Is the idea here that they're kind of like almost, yeah, like being blasted apart by him flying through. But I thought to myself, oh yeah, there should be like a lens flare of the sun somewhere, and then I thought to myself, wait a minute. The only time where you're really going to get a sky like this is whenever the sun is directly above, or something like that, directly above or at the slightest of angles in either direction. So let's just say the sun is above him, and then I'll give him a rim light along the top of him, and that's basically all I'll do with that. And we're probably going to go with a very light. A very light gradient map this time. Probably something like. I'll probably keep it to be kind of yellow. Is most likely what I'll go for. I'll probably avoid anything too sunsetty or autumnal. So we'll get rid of. We probably won't have a red in there, but we'll probably keep it to be like yellow for the most part. Probably very. You want it to still be warm tone because it's broad daylight. Which is not a time of day that I typically draw. I typically draw night or sunset or sunrise. I don't typically draw anything too crazy because you get more dynamic, interesting lighting at times which are not broad daylight. Not even necessarily broad daylight, but I mean like midday. Midday isn't like super interesting as a time of day. But I'm gonna give it a try here. We'll see if it works. The painted shading should in theory not be too difficult because there's only two colors that I actually have to paint over. But the difficult part will be the fact that I have to do again. I have to sell the metal. I have to sell the kind of sheen on the metal, which is going to be a thing that I'll have to do here, yeah. So that will be part of it. But I suppose I don't want to dawdle too much longer because, again, we're 3.5 hours in and I've still got 2 sections left to do. So I'll carry on and I'll get this done. So yeah, I don't have to do anything in terms of the sunlight or anything like that. We'll just say the sun is directly above him, so that way I can put a little rim light along the edge of him, like here, and then the rest of it can be left just along the top of him, maybe along this leg here. Because that's maybe along like this side of him, maybe. But that's like a strong maybe. I'm thinking literally just along the top of him and nowhere else. But yeah, anyways, we'll do this painted shading and I'll be back to do the detailed shading and the light line, which I've talked a lot about here for some reason. Anyway. Okay, that's our painted shading done. As I said, not too tricky, reasonably quick. Again, there's a bit of a thing which can happen whenever you're doing this kind of shading, especially with the kind of white highlights, where it can start to get this, what I've called it before, this kind of generic digital painting vibe. And that's a thing which I feel like may have slightly happened here. Again, the detailed shading should sort of mask that a little bit, as will stuff like the gradient maps and the texture and all that stuff. That'll sort of mask that idea. Once I have a rim light and stuff like that on him, it should look a little better. So yeah, it's whenever I say that, you probably got an image of it in your mind, just sort of like the kind of generic digital painting where it's got the kind of soft white, kind of painted highlights and stuff like that. It's a very distinct look, but I don't exactly know how I describe it to someone who wouldn't know what I'm talking about. It's this again. It's the type of thing which is very identifiable. Again, that should be kind of masked by the detailed shading. So again, I'm just going to be kind of following the kind of basic lighting setup that I've already established here. I'll be doing some kind of, again, I'm not going to do a huge amount with the detailed shading here. I'm just going to do enough to mask some of the ugliness that we've got going on in parts here. So I'll just do around the edges like this with darks, and the lights will be the front. And then I'll do around the shoulders with a light line. Pretty subtle white light line, really emphasizing the H's of white for some reason. But yeah, anyways, I'll do this and then I'll be back to do the gradient maps and wrap up. Yeah. Alright, so that is our detailed shading and light line done. It took me about 16 different attempts to do my signature correctly there, because my hands are quite tired now from doing this. Because this has been a long one. This is 4.5 hours. This is a hefty one. Actually, technically, I think this is actually shorter than the previous one. I think this is shorter than Electra. I'm not sure. That one was 4 hours 40 minutes, I think. I couldn't tell you actually off the top of my head. I'd have to check, and I don't really want to. So I'm just gonna do the gradient maps here, and then we'll carry on, and then we'll wrap up. So right, gradient maps. Let's see, what do I want to do here? So the darkest color, we're gonna want to try and keep this soft. So I'll make this kind of like a dark-ish blue, something like here. I want to kind of maybe brighten it up a tiny bit. We don't want that to be too dark. We don't want it to be a cold color palette, so we're going to want to bring this up to be maybe a bit of a warmer color, make it a bit of a yellow or something like that. We want to preserve most of our tones here, I think. I would try and avoid the red as like a mid-tone, because it will sort of make things a little too bright. So I'll do that. This is going to be a bit of a complicated one, I think, in terms of the colors that I'm going to have to use for it. We're looking at something quite autumnal right now, which isn't what I was going for. Right. Let's try and get something like that. So what's the color here again? This is blue. Make it a little bluer. Make this one a little bluer as well. Right, that looks alright. Purple, maybe make that a little duller. This is getting a little messy here, I think. Let's put that about there. Change the red perhaps to be just a bit more neutral red. Make it a little brighter. Yellow, that should be, I mean, yeah, that's maximum brightness. Maybe even make it a little paler. Maybe that should be what'll fix it, make it just all a little paler. I think that might actually be a good idea, just make the stuff paler. That appears to be the solution here, just kind of thin it out a little bit. It's alright. This is a pretty hard, like, thermal color palette, so I'm curious to see what happens with this. It's interesting. It's quite vivid. It's actually quite vivid, surprisingly, especially given how I thinned it all out. That's on overlay. On soft light, yeah, it's a lot more subtle on soft light, so let's turn that down. I want this to be kind of subtle, so we're going to have this be 60%. Because we still want it to be present, but we don't want it to be too intense, so that's 60%. I might try some different stuff with this, because we don't want this to be a dark color palette. So what does the luminosity look like? Because that is going to darken things. That's a similar thing to do that isn't as intense. Screen tone, that's a little too bright. Lighten. This is lighten in comparison to luminosity. I mean, lighten obviously makes it lighter. Tell you what, I might put a lighten over this after the luminosity, because I like the luminosity because it will bring back some of our older tones as opposed to the kind of core color palette of the gradient map. Color burn will make it pretty intense. That's why I always make that small. Now we're getting dangerous here. We're adding 4 gradient maps, so let's try a lighten on this. And then bring that up to like... Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Lighten doesn't seem to do much here. It just makes the clouds very purple. Get rid of that. Get rid of that one. We don't need that. Okay, so then the texture will probably do the rest for us. The last little bits of work for brightening things up, I suppose. The lighten layer wasn't a bad idea, though, I don't think. Just maybe not for this. I've used them before in other things. I don't know if I've used it in an art video before, but I have used that for something or other at one point or another. So right, let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this texture. Let's make it nice and subtle. Overlay, make it about 20%. We don't want it to overpower our sky, because it'll kind of confuse our clouds a little bit because of how light it is. Right, okay. How does that look on the character? Because we don't want it to make the armor look too gritty, messy. I think that looks alright. It's funny just how blue the light trails on the repulsors became. Just like how deep blue, I mean. That's the gradient maps for you. Look, that's without it, and it's all... See, without it, it's all got this kind of like, almost like a greeny tone to the blue, but with it, it's all got a very purpley tone. Which I suppose, I mean, it doesn't make an enormous difference. But I mean, that's because of all the purple that was in the gradient map. See, this is the problem, is that whenever you're not going for a specific color palette with a gradient map, it can be difficult to work with. It can end up creating a lot of stuff which you don't really want, or a lot of stuff which doesn't look very nice to you. So that's just a thing that can happen with it. It's a tool which has its demerits as well as its benefits. But yeah, it's funny actually. This was the idea which I had for because I had intended on doing an Iron Man drawing back at the very beginning of the art show, but I didn't, and the reason was because I ended up doing the Marvel Nemesis drawings, and that occupied like 12 weeks, so 11 or 12 weeks. So it was a case of where I was like, well, I'm going to be doing Iron Man in this anyway, so there's no point in thinking about it. So I ended up not doing Iron Man during the course of that. During the course of the early run of things before Marvel Nemesis. And it's funny because I had intended to. And this was the kind of thing that I'd intended on doing, of Iron Man in the kind of bright blue sky, almost kind of reminiscent of the chase scene from the first Iron Man movie sort of thing. But again, this is sort of my idea, at least, of a minor modernization of the modular suit. You see, there's a lot of M's in there, so that's what kind of tripped me up a little bit. But yeah, this is the sort of idea. I think it came through still pretty close to being the modular suit. I feel like the color balance and maybe some of the design elements do sort of maybe not necessarily initially evoke that, which is maybe a shame. Which is, I think, yeah, maybe a shame. I think the square. I think it might be more obvious if he was in a standing pose rather than a flying pose. I think the fact that he's in a flying pose does obscure things because of the nature of the perspective. Because if he was in like just a standing pose and he was just standing there and you just see his arms and all this stuff and him standing there, just see the full page body shot, I think you'd be able to see a lot more clearly that, oh, he's got the gold like kind of arms and he's got the core gold body and then the little bits of gold on the legs, but it's predominantly red. I think you'd be able to clock it by saying, oh, that's the modular suit. But it's a little less obvious here. I think the giant triangular chest piece as well would maybe clue that in, but you know, who knows. But anyways, I don't feel like I need to ramble too much longer. I'm pretty happy with this one. I enjoyed doing this. As difficult as it was, it's not even as difficult as it was, but as kind of detailed as it was, as technical as it was, it was still a fun one. It was a bit of a different one than what I normally do. I don't normally do stuff with this many nitty-gritty details. I don't think I've done one with this many kind of little tiny details since like the Sentinel drawing in the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 mural, or like the Boba Fett drawing I did that one time. So it's a case where, yeah, a lot of these things I don't normally do. I normally pick characters who lend themselves more to a shorter episode because I'm conscious of time and I want to give myself the opportunity to talk for a bit. So that's the thing. I don't want to be spending hours and hours and hours just doing the. It's funny. I don't want to be spending hours and hours just doing the drawing. I want to have a decent amount of time just to talk, because that's the core content of the video. Is me talking. That's the core bulk of the video. Is me actually speaking, because all of the actual drawing bits are sped up. So that's the thing. It's mostly just me mostly just me speaking. I don't want it to be. I still want it to be like that I'm explaining myself and everything. I want to give myself the opportunity to actually talk about these things, because that's the purpose of these. But yeah. Anyways, I think that's enough rambling. I think I'll just kind of wrap things up then. So, if you like the video, do whatever it is that you normally do, whether that be liking or not. I would of course prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that. So, I'm not going to try. But yeah, so long as you don't do anything negative, I'm happy. And yeah, if you want to subscribe, it's the same deal. I of course prefer if you did it. Can't make you. You know where the subscribe button is. If you want to hit it, please do. You know where it is. You presumably watched a YouTube video before, so it's below the video, if that helps. And yeah, if you've got any suggestions for a character you'd like to see me draw in the future, you can leave a comment, a nicely worded one, because if you don't, well, I'm just going to either A, remove the comment, or B, just ignore it entirely. So, if you actually want me to read it, it'd be nice. That'd be my preference, because, I don't want to just trough through garbage. Anyways, and yeah, if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. So with all that said, that is us. I will say goodbye, and I will leave you. So, bye-bye.